Welcome to Mastering Fundraising, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. Mastering Fundraising endeavors to cover the most important fundraising topics with the goal of helping the audience reach their full potential as fundraisers. This podcast will share stories, tips, and guidance on the most important elements of fundraising. If you want to earn an advanced degree in fundraising, this is the podcast for you. Mastering Fundraising is a collaboration between Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership and the 5-Tool Fundraiser, two leaders in providing relevant and expert content to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. Without further delay, let's jump into the current episode. Please join me in welcoming your host for today, Chris Looney.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. You're tuning into Mastering Fundraising, the podcast where we dive deep into the strategies, structures, and stories that shape exceptional fundraising results. Today's guest is Ryan Marshall, Assistant Vice President for Development at Atrium Health Foundation in Charlotte, North Carolina. Ryan leads major philanthropic initiatives within one of the most dynamic healthcare systems in the country, and his work has helped Atrium Health secure significant support for programs, facilities, research, and patient-centered innovation. He brings a clear understanding of what it takes to prepare, plan, and execute a successful capital campaign, and what all fundraisers need to know long before they launch one. And in this episode, we're going to explore fundamentals of capital campaigns, the internal readiness required for success, the role of leadership and volunteers, and the lessons learned that shape strong campaign execution. Ryan's also going to share some insights on how fundraisers can build discipline, anticipate challenges, and create momentum that inspires donors to invest in transformational projects. So, Ryan, thanks for joining me today.
What's up, buddy?
Hey, thank you for being here. You are such a pro in fundraising. We have worked together in the past. Now you're out there raising money in campaign settings for Atrium, which is awesome. I know this is going to be a great conversation. So let's jump in. But before we start talking campaigns, let's start with a little background on you. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your leadership journey in the nonprofit and fundraising space.
Yeah, I mean, it's a diverse one. I think compared to many of the fundraisers I've met, it's unique in the sense that I did get into it on purpose. Didn't think that I would still be in it. So I guess I am in good company in that it wasn't necessarily the forever plan. But I was just highly curious about what motivates people to give away their hard-earned dollars. Where I grew up in a very lower middle class to low income area, and the thought of people just giving money away outside of church on Sunday was just a very foreign concept to me.
Right.
So I was lucky enough to jump into my career with a consulting firm. And so I literally grabbed my degree one day and got on a plane to Lincoln, Nebraska the next to start this illustrious career. Who doesn't want to start in Lincoln, Nebraska?
Listen, I remember that campaign.
Yeah. It was a shell shock start of just and not in any bad way, just such inspirational conversations and a whole different world of like working in restaurants one week, and then the next week I was working in a campaign. There were some transferable skills, thankfully, in making conversation and some basics, but a very different world. And spent 12 wonderful years in the nonprofit consulting space, and life got in the way, as it often does, but in a positive way. I met my wife, who's also a fundraiser. We can do a different podcast on that sometime of like,
That's a good one.
What's it like when there's no escape from fundraising?
Right.
But my wife and I settled down in Columbus, Ohio, where I was lucky enough to start my healthcare journey with a healthcare organization there that covered healthcare and had hospitals throughout a large portion of the state of Ohio. Along came COVID, and along with all, like everybody, it was kind of a moment of curiosity and pondering of, am I where I want to be, and am I doing what I want to do? The doing what I want to do was a for sure where we want to be. My wife and I had always talked about maybe getting to Charlotte someday. We thought 50s or 60s in our lifespan might be where we look at that move. but as we all remember the days of the pandemic, it's like, why not? The world could end tomorrow. If I'm going to go apply for jobs, it was kind of an offhand comment of, if something pops up in Charlotte, do you care if I apply? And she was actually the one that found the posting. So that brought me to the place where I'm at now at Atrium Health, which is part of this over second largest healthcare system in the country, in Advocate Health, which covers everything all the way from Macon, Georgia, up to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So just an enormous system to be a part of, and
Wow.
that makes fundraising a land of opportunity, but also a land of complication too. So I've been super lucky to have this career. I am absolutely going to give it everything I've got for as long as I can, because it's beyond a career now. As was recently talking with our new chief development officer for the enterprise, and she used the word vocation, and I said, thank you for the reminder of that, of like, this
Yeah.
this is a vocation, it's a calling, and I'm in. So that's the
Thank you.
quick overview.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to my attention as a reminder as well. We often forget that being in the nonprofit space, whether you're a leader, well, everyone's a leader, but uh, if you're working in the nonprofit space,
Yeah,
you're probably mission minded, and it is a vocation, it's a ministry, it's a calling, a passion, all of those things. So,
absolutely.
yeah. So you've held a number of different titles, a number of different organizations. I'm wondering what your favorite professional role is.
Yeah.
Not position, but what is it that you do that you like the most in your
Yeah.
life?
Um, I think I'm pretty job secure, so I don't need to brown nose, but the job that I'm in right now is truly been a dream. And I think it's because I really get to be a player coach here. I'm not sitting in the chair I'm in right now as the leader of the campaign, and I'm just sitting here, directing the orchestra. I am the head of a couple of our service lines. I'm in the weeds with donors and volunteers. I'm doing what we want the whole team to do. So I'm getting the chance to lead by example. More importantly, I'm getting the chance to learn from this team. I'm working with some of the best people that I've ever worked with in my career, and to be in a leadership position but still be able to learn from the people around you, I think is a pretty lucky spot. So that player coach thing is what I love, because I don't ever believe in asking folks to do something that you're not doing yourself. And being able to do that here has been a wonderful journey so far.
I love that. Player coach. I mean, it's
Yeah,
such an important concept, and it's so true in fundraising, where often you are responsible for leading major gift efforts or being at the table with major donors,
yeah,
and then going out and teaching others to do it, joining them, encouraging them, and making sure that they feel supported and successful. So,
absolutely.
what a great role.
Yeah,
Uh, Importantly, there have likely been some very key figures in your life professionally that have helped mentor you or helped you grow. I'd love to hear about a few individuals that have meant a great deal to you professionally, and why they were so important.
yeah. We'll we'll do that other podcast episode on the wife thing and the married into fundraising thing, because it is a blessing to be able to talk about this with my wife, and hear about some of the things that she works in. Um, her role is in she works for a service that provides support services to folks who are victims of domestic abuse and sexual assault.
My
So
gosh.
she usually keeps me from whining about my day, because
Right,
my days are not nearly as heavy as hers.
right.
So I'm blessed to have her around. But kind of looking back on my career, I didn't necessarily intend to, but I just naturally gravitated to the people who had a service mindset. I wasn't very good at asking people to be a mentor to me. I learned that later in life, and I do have a mentor here in the Charlotte area who actually is not in the not-for-profit sector. He's had his background has been in the finance and venture capital area more than it's been that. But he's been deeply involved from a volunteer leadership standpoint in nonprofits. So he's been a great mentor to have here. But just some of the other people I naturally gravitated to. I think we both knew Brian Nevins in our day of working together. Brian inspired me in his approach of he just was never afraid to go to bat for his people. Our jobs when we were consultants were very much like, you're there to serve, and it's all about the client. Not everybody is great at supporting the consultant in that, right? So, I was just very inspired by Brian in many
Wonderful.
instances of how much he supported and went to bat for his team because
Love it.
he knew what they were going through because he had done it himself. So that player coach mindset. Um, but he really wanted them to succeed, because he knew what a lot of us were giving up in terms of sometimes personal life to advance our career. So I took a lot from watching him, and how he acted in a room, as he was in board meetings and things like that.
Right.
And he's a guy that I think really I credit with saving my career in terms of keeping me in the nonprofit space. I think I met him at a time where I was kind of ready to do something else, and he really inspired me to stick in this space.
Hmm.
And then here in Charlotte, I've had the wonderful crossing of paths with our president, Armando Chartier, who prior to being here at Atrium Health was the I think chairman is what they call it, of the Cleveland Clinic Philanthropic
Hmm.
Institute. So he's the guy that really, I think they had a pretty successful fundraising shop when he arrived, but I mean, what he left it as was night and day difference compared to what he arrived. And Armando is one of those guys who the reason he succeeds is because he never stops bragging on his team.
Hmm.
Um, he has said, I couldn't even begin to think of how many hundreds of times I've heard him say, "This isn't about me," and seen him in a public forum always talking about his team. So, those are just two people that I observed that I very much wanted to emulate that in my own style because they're good things to think of because in fundraising, it's not about us. It is very much about the donor and their opportunities and how they can help make a difference in the world. So if you have that as your leadership mindset, it really helps you a lot as a fundraiser too.
Yeah. Well, speaking of leadership philosophies, is that yours, or is there some other philosophy or characteristic or way of thinking about nonprofit leadership that is critical and vital to the way you lead?
Yeah, no, again, kind of like I didn't go out and seek a mentor. I hadn't really come down to like, what are my principles? What are the things I stand on until my wife and I really thought about having children. And we were like, well, what are the family values? What are the family mottos
Uh,
going to be? And not like we need them written on a wall, but what are they?
mhm.
And we're both too just we like to keep things simple. So our family motto, which I take right into my career every day, is just a few simple things. Be a good person, do the right thing, and leave things better than you found them. Those are three pretty simple things in terms of the mindset, but they're wildly difficult to pull off. Being a good person,
Right.
being a good person every day in this world right now is not an easy thing to do. Um, Choosing to do the right thing has never been easy, even whether it's you're thinking about when we were kids or this world we're living in now.
Right.
And I just think even if it's something as simple as, you're going to, we've got so many places now that are like cafeteria style food halls, and something as simple as like sitting down at a dirty table but leaving it clean, like that's not really that hard to do,
Right.
and it could make somebody else's day, So we just try to live that lifestyle, and I definitely carry those three things with me in my leadership mentality.
Nah, man, I've got goosebumps because it is simple, as you said, but it's so important, and you can carry that from personal to professional so easily, and it makes just a super difference to those around you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we need to transition into our conversation on
Yeah,
campaigns, and I'm a little bit fearful that we're opening a can of worms here because
I
it
knew
is
you are.
it's a big topic, and we joked before the conversation that we might need to gather again to cover ground that we weren't adequately able to cover in this
Yeah.
conversation. So, with apologies, we'll move forward on the topic of capital campaigns. And when we first met, we were both working for the same nonprofit fundraising consulting firm that provided that expertise in mounting successful capital campaigns.
Yeah.
And so I have great confidence that I'm talking to the right person here, but we do need to sort of set up some context before I think the audience might be able to kind of discern some of the more meaty topics around campaigns.
Yeah.
So, in terms of setting the stage, what are the conditions that tell an organization that they're ready to even consider a capital campaign?
Yeah, and you were already kind of alluding to it, and I felt it was necessary as I was thinking about this conversation that you put the disclaimer out there first, and I was joking with you that I somewhat use this for shock value, but I also say it because I mean it. I've spent my all but a couple years of my professional career in campaigns, and campaign is my least favorite word
Right.
because it means so many different things to so many different people. And usually when that word comes up, each individual is thinking about a different thing. So as you
Right.
look at the
Good.
nonprofit world and somebody says a campaign and maybe it's in the boardroom, well, there's 13 different people who are thinking about 13 different things, especially if they serve on other nonprofit boards or whatever it may be. So, that's the disclaimer ahead of time. But to me, campaigns are still important because you're talking about the bedrock strategies of how you go about good philanthropic strategy. So whether you're in a campaign mode or not, everything we're going to talk about today is useful. Um, and at some point in your career, if you're in fundraising, you're probably going to be in at least one campaign, or maybe you're a sicko like me and you spend most of your life in it. Um, but back when I was a consultant, those were very tight, compressed campaign timetables. So we really had to get down to the brass tacks of case, leadership, prospect, plans. Those are the four elements of a successful campaign, and evaluating that landscape. If you've got two of the four, you're probably not there. If you've only got one of the four, we probably shouldn't have been using the C word yet. We've probably got just some basic organizational structure to work.
Right.
Three of the four, we can work with that. Let's do a good study and we should be able to figure it out. And then, you know, the plan part usually fell on us, and that's the reason they hired a consultant, right?
Right.
So as I transitioned into healthcare, those same principles still exist. I got a little bit more laser focused on them. And here in our campaign with our leadership team, and it's available to the whole staff, I have a very simple spreadsheet that I've termed our Focus Five. So rather than the four elements, it's five things, but the fifth thing is organizational structure and just making sure, and not like how we're evaluating staff and is Johnny great at his job? Is Johnny bad at, not that kind of thing, but just organizationally, are we maintaining what we need for the momentum of the campaign? So that was the added fifth one, just for naturally, running a shop. But then it also is a little bit more detailed in the prospect area, right? But within each of the, as Focus Five was the play on words there, because within each of those five areas, I have five things to focus on, because five is already a lot. And if you put 5 times 5, I'm not great at math, but last I checked, that was 25.
Good. Good. Yeah.
If you're
That's
trying to
right.
focus on more than 25 things, then you aren't able to focus on anything. Like,
Yeah.
so, looking in those areas, case leadership, prospect plan, organizational structure, it's okay to have less than five if one of them is really big, but we usually have anywhere from 3 to 5 focus areas within each of those. So that's kind
Yeah.
of how, as my career going from consultant into the shop, just how I kind of transitioned those focuses to do the evaluation of, are we ready or not? And then even when we're in it, we're still focused on the same things, and where are we at with those? And it's an evergreen thing that, as soon as something gets checked off, it gets replaced with another focus opportunity.
Well, good. I mean, I'm glad that you highlighted the fact that you have potentially 25 different categories of evaluation to determine, a sequencing and readiness of the organization to launch a capital campaign, much like, launching a rocket where you have a countdown after going through all of the various readiness sequences to make sure that all systems are a go, right? And I think the challenge is that oftentimes a board member or a CEO says, we need to build a building. And someone says, how much does it cost? And they say, I don't know, maybe a couple $1 million. And they say, all right, well, let's go head.
And there's your case statement.
And there's your
building.
case.
Here's the building rendering, and here's how much it costs. That's our
right.
case.
So let's go. And true to capital campaigns, there is often this need for a defined amount of time, a defined goal, a start date and end date, all of these things that evade a lot of organizations that think campaigns are easy or maybe jump into them without much thought or preparation. So I'm so grateful that you highlighted the different conditions that need to exist or should exist for an organization before they jump into a campaign. What are the most common misconceptions organizations have about launching a campaign from your experience?
Yeah, we all, I mean, it's just natural in any line of work that you look at your competitors and what they're doing. And, the famous quote is that comparison is the thief of joy. And it's also in an even more negative way, causes a lot of nonprofits to go, we're different, and therefore that won't work. My response to we're different is good. Thank God, because if you're not different and you're just another rinse and repeat of some other nonprofit across town that's doing the same thing, then you're doing a disservice to the community by just watering down the philanthropy and impact. But your difference is your differentiator. That's not a weakness. So I think, one of the pitfalls and frequently causes organizations to not even hit go or even approach, go on the monopoly board is just sitting back and thinking about all those what ifs and thinking in a negative way, oh, we're just so different, or that we can't have that kind of success because we're not as well known as that nonprofit.
Right.
Use your differentiator as your strength. Because you're not as well known is an opportunity, not a weakness. So,
yeah. That's so funny that you mentioned that. I remember a conversation with a CFO of a large organization who refused to move into a campaign despite good timing, I felt, and needs that were only mounting because the response was, well, we're poor and our people won't support things like this without it being tested. So this assumption that we can't do this failure mentality, which literally kind of translated in my mind was a possibly $25 to $35 million mistake of the organization. Right?
Somebody else went and got it because they didn't.
Or just the organization failed to deliver, on the mission and continued to think of themselves as weak instead of strong, and didn't really build that muscle, right? That you could build through these campaigns. So when someone calls you within the health system about a potential campaign, what are the questions that you kind of ask first to understand their level of readiness?
Yeah. Healthcare moves so incredibly fast, yet fails to innovate at the same time. And I say that knowing that potentially a healthcare person could see or hear this. We all, I think, kind of agree in that to different degrees. But in terms of a campaign and how it can enact change and innovation, the first question is this project important at the highest levels of leadership?
Oh, good.
Hopefully all the way up to the CEO. But at a minimum, is it important to at least most of the C-suite? Because if this is just kind of a pet project or wouldn't it be nice if, let's not do it. because that lack of enthusiasm or lack of engagement of our leadership will be noticed by our donors, and it will not inspire them to come forward.
So
And
good.
then I think here's another whole podcast episode. Is the campaign aligned with the top strategies and priorities for the entire organization?
Brilliant. Yeah.
There's been, not in campaigns I've worked on, but some things that I've witnessed, whether they were a true campaign or whether they were just kind of a side project, there were some things that would be handed off to the foundation to do a fundraiser for a memorial garden or something that, like, it is meaningful. Those things are necessary in hospital environments where there can be such high and lows in human life. We need those spaces. I'm not demeaning the purpose of those, but if we're talking about a comprehensive campaign and you want to use the C word in that, um, it has to be aligned with what your biggest and best priorities are, because that ties right back to what I said first of then it will have engagement at the C-suite level and importance at the C-suite level.
Right.
And related to that, and it's not entirely on the topic of your question, but since I already said it, and the alignment with organizational priorities, did we have enough runway to plan for this? Again, thankfully not the organization I'm in, but I know there are instances both in healthcare and other nonprofit sectors where things go from planning months and months and months of planning a certain strategy, and we're going to build this thing or we're going to begin this program, and it gets handed off to the foundation at the last minute. Like, here's what you guys are going to do. I can't go raise money for that tomorrow. But if you would engage the foundation or your head fundraiser in the planning process 9 months ago, he or she would have already been working on their team with developing the prospects for that. So,
Right.
looking at it, is there enough runway? It just points back to there has to be philanthropic leadership in the strategy room. And that's getting to be a bit more common, but I don't think it's the norm.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned runway and having an adequate runway. No plane can take off without a runway. That otherwise it's probably called a helicopter. But
Yeah.
The idea of having pre-campaign planning seems to be pretty darn important,
Yeah.
and there needs to be an investment in that preparation.
Mhm.
Architects, build plans before they start construction. It's not a foreign concept to anyone, but I think it's negated oftentimes in fundraising because outsiders don't really give it proper thought. But tell me, what are the essential components of proper pre-campaign planning?
Yeah. I was lucky enough. I got I didn't think I would, but one of those pandemic things, I swore when I left undergrad that I was never going back to school. But just between tuition reimbursement from my employer and my wife being in higher ed at the time and the discount she got, it was like, crap, I should go get my MBA.
Awesome.
So through my MBA program and through some of the stuff that I've been lucky enough to work on here, gotten to work in kind of the not true venture space, but innovation and thinking about some of how you have those building a business thoughts. And one of the big things that you've got to think about on the front end is the common advice from people who've been there, done that, is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. If you're only in love with the solution, you're likely not going to be able to pivot enough to truly address the problem.
Love
So
it.
I think a lot of organizations in pre-campaign planning try to develop a campaign or the building, whatever it is, they fall so in love with that, the solution, that they've gotten away from what the problem is. And donors want to help you solve a problem. So you're losing out on an opportunity there. And in doing so and focusing on the problem and taking that problem to your donors, especially in like a feasibility study type environment, um, you're able to team up with the donors before they've become a donor, um, and think about what would be a solution that inspires not just you, the nonprofit, but your donor as well. And that's when you're crossing the threshold from getting transactional gifts where people aren't really inspired by your mission or your case statement to the transformative gifts that really make a big campaign like our $500 million campaign a reality.
Yeah, amazing. My goodness. And what would you kind of say are the evaluation mechanisms or categories when you're looking at infrastructure, staffing, and other things to determine whether an organization can support a multi-year, sort of campaign, the C word, that
Yeah.
needs to be big.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't be in healthcare and say the C word because it means something. It's a different C and one that's much more terrifying than a campaign. But
Sure.
As I'm thinking about that question, there's a couple different angles that I look at it. Specific to where I am in healthcare, I evaluate it with the lens of, do we have the right internal partners? And do those partners have a functional match on our staff? So in terms of not just clinical leaders, but administrative leaders, do we have the right ones engaged and regularly communicating and working with us? And is the person that they're working with a good match for them? And I don't mean, are they friends? I mean, are they going to challenge each other in whether something is going to be a fundraising priority or not? Just because it is a top need on your list, clinician X, does not mean that it's going to be something that a donor would want to fund. There has to be a correlation. And then I think just something that does apply to any nonprofit, regardless of sector, fundraisers have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable if you're going to be in a campaign. I think there's a lot of folks who want everything to be out of a box. If I'm going to go into a campaign mode, I want to have, this Q&A sheet, this case statement, this fact sheet, this. Sure, we can do a fair amount of that, but lean into the uncomfortable and go and find out what your donor wants to know. Again, it not being about us. Yeah, you need to be the content expert, but to steal a phrase from my wife, again, who I've learned a lot of things from, her favorite thing to say to a donor who asks her a question she doesn't know is, I don't know the answer to that, but we're going to learn it together. So, fundraisers sometimes are not comfortable being uncomfortable. They want the answers and they want to be prepared, right? Because they're going out and representing the organization. They don't want to look silly. I don't mean be comfortable with the uncomfortable as a knock. I just mean it as you can only prepare so much, and then eventually you got to launch, right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Let not perfection be the enemy of good.
Yeah.
So,
and then, the last thought on that was coaching and mentoring. Again, to go back to my player coach mentality, most campaigns don't have time for turnover, especially multiple turnovers. So coaching and mentoring is a must. The thought that we're just going to handle our staff with these mile-long metrics lists and we're going to go about hiring and firing, that is not going to play in a campaign. And it's part of the evaluation process for if you're ready for one. If you don't particularly love your fundraising team or your whatever team part of your team, don't launch into a campaign if you think you might have a lot of turnover there, because it's going to be a turn on.
Right. That seems like what you're talking about would be identified, evidenced through the work of maybe a feasibility study. Yeah. I know those can be powerful, but are often misunderstood.
Totally.
What are your thoughts on feasibility studies?
Yeah. Having conducted several of them as a consultant and having been a part of a couple of them on this side of the fence, I certainly am a firm believer in the value of a study. But I think there's not a one-size-fits-all approach for that. And I sit on a couple nonprofit boards that I've been lucky enough to join over the last couple of years, and one of them is going through that process right now. And we're listening to some pitches and receiving proposals from consultants, and we wanted to talk to each of them first to let them know, we're only a couple years removed from our last campaign. We knew that we would probably need a bigger facility, but we wanted to build something that was feasible and reasonable. And by golly, it has been a huge hit, and we're out of space already. And we're not able to meet our mission in a way that we're satisfied with. So we need a study, yes, and we need a third party evaluator, but we don't need to go all the way back to square one and interview 50 people as if we've never done a campaign before. We do want to put somebody across the table from our donors to get at the advice that we need, and not have a conversation that's more the cliche warning that the next conversation you're going to have is going to be a solicitation from this organization. That's not what a feasibility study should be. A study should be, hey, look, the organization members themselves probably are going to discuss this with you down the road, but they would really like some kind of blind advice as they're thinking through this. That way that they can build an opportunity that's going to mean something to the shareholders, if you want to think of your donors in that way, that means something to them. So, the study is just essential in not just informing the organization, but developing early buy-in with the donors, being listened to without being asked for money.
Yeah, that's great. The early buy-in is so important.
Yeah.
And campaigns can often live and die by their early leadership support, leadership gifts.
Yeah.
How do you identify and cultivate your earliest prospects in a campaign?
Yeah, I think, and you were talking about an organization earlier that just had that, dreaded failure to launch, paralysis. And I don't blame them for that. I think we in nonprofits tend to be such good stewards of our donors that we don't want to let them down. We don't want the organization to look silly, and therefore we don't want to go into a campaign that might fail.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is you can only prepare so much. And it doesn't mean that you have to sit in a room for 6 months and build everything perfectly and then go just blindly public with it right away. Um, build most of it, build 75% of it based on what you learned in your study and what is right about your organization. But then start engaging with your donors and allow both the words that they're saying and the initial gifts that you get to inform that last bit of the plan. So build, by all means, don't go out blind, but get some early buy-in and information before you really launch into anything, even if it's not public, but even before you really go into a more large scale effort. I think I'm a big fan, and I think it's okay if an organization sets out in the early stages of a campaign without a goal. If you feel like you still need to have a number, a range is okay. And you can sit across from those initial supporters and say, hey, here's what we could accomplish if we raise 15 million. Here's what we can accomplish if we raise 18 million. Here's what 20 million looks like. But we don't know which one of those it's going to be yet. And candidly, it's going to be our early conversations that inform that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's why you don't put a number on it during the quiet phase, because you actually need to understand how your early supporters are going to come back to you with their own giving.
That's one of those misnomers that I hate about a campaign. Like, for a lot of people, it's just the number. What's the goal? That's not the campaign. Like that's so I love not talking about the number early on.
Yeah, good. The range concept is important. What strategies help you build momentum during that quiet phase where most donors don't actually see what's happening behind the scenes, and there's not a lot of visibility in terms of what the final number or final projects might be?
Yeah, and it ties into what I was just talking about with the last question. So sorry if any of it's redundant, but to reemphasize the importance of planning. I think study is sometimes misconstrued. Whether you do it yourself or you hire a consultant. I think most organizations hire an outside consultant, but they're going to give us the report and we're going to build a campaign off of that. That was just the study. It's a feasibility and planning stage. So don't forget to be really intentional about that planning stage,
Right.
and tying it back to the study. But I think, again, falling in love with the problem and not the solution, you're not trying to go from study and planning straight into developing a set plan. You need to remain curious and keep enough of an open mindset early on that you find your best partners that are willing to really go the extra mile for you in the cause. Engaging those early stakeholders in an opportunity to be heard and to help build some of the final pieces are, again, what jump a donor from, "Yeah, I'll give you a nice gift," to, "I'm going to lead in hard, and I'm going to give a gift that even makes me a little uncomfortable." But that's a different mindset.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting elements of campaigns is the involvement of volunteers. A lot of times, the annual fundraising that an organization might do doesn't really depend so significantly on volunteers in the way that campaigns seem to. And I was interested to know how you guide volunteer leaders so that they feel confident and prepared to be champions and
Yeah.
ambassadors.
Yeah, it's tough for me to answer that from if I were just in this chair, because really we're lucky to have them and we have great leadership on this campaign, but we're not relying on our fundraisers or excuse me, we're not relying on our volunteers to fundraise here. Our fundraisers here are driving cultivation and engagement, and they're great at it. But the comfortable door opening rather than going out and asking people for a gift. But I recognize that that's a blessing, and not every smaller nonprofits need to have a solid volunteer base to lead their fundraising efforts. And in that case, I would just encourage a really solid um, survey of looking at what your skill matrix is across those volunteers.
Mm.
SMART goals are just as important for a volunteer as they are for individuals. Things that are achievable and attainable and are realistic are more important for a volunteer than they are for someone who's actually paid to do a job. So do that skill matrix work, figure out not only what skills individuals have, but as a whole, what are we strong at and what are we not so strong at? Do that due diligence. That way you're realistic about what you can accomplish with your volunteers, and you're not putting expectations on them that early skills survey said you were never going to get done in the first place.
Yeah, right. Um, Not all campaigns sort of have a straight line shot to goal. There's a lot of peaks and valleys, a lot of times where it feels like things are stalled out. And I'm just wondering what some of your hacks are, your advice would be, steps you would recommend taking when things are stalled and need to get moving again.
Yeah. Um, no offense to the United Way or anybody that's used them historically. Love you all, but thermometers drive me crazy. They present the image of constant achievement and success, and
Right.
campaigns ebb and flow. Yes, the number always adds up. Some cases you might have a gift retracted, but you're not going to lose money. You're constantly going to gain money in a campaign. But the duck's feet beneath the surface aspect of that um, is a whole different ball of wax. So the ebb and flow requires that for our team here, a regular exercise of projections. This individual person, what's the high, low likely amount that they may come in at? Evaluating where my activity levels are in
Mm.
cultivation, stewardship, asks that I'm getting ready to make, asks that are pending. This is a volume game. At the end of the
Right.
day,
Spaghetti on the wall, right?
it is not without strategy, but a campaign is not rocket science either. It is a
All
volume
right.
game. And if you're not asking for enough, knowing that we don't get what we can totally ask for most of the time, then you're never going to get there. So I think for those that, hit those momentum stalls, if you're doing your homework and you're doing your projections, that should give you the confidence. And hopefully you're promoting that to your team to say, hey, I know it's been a minute since we've had a big win, but let's look at all this potential here and know that the big wave is coming. and be confident in that.
Yeah, that's great. What about working with your teams internally? What advice do you have for the development leaders who are managing both a campaign and ongoing annual fundraising responsibilities separately?
Yeah, I'll be quick-ish on this one because here I'm lucky enough that the campaign is the annual, like the campaign is anything and everything in this
It's
case.
comprehensive. It includes every
Yeah,
dollar raised over a
yeah.
certain period of time. Yeah.
And for me, that's a blessing. I love it. But I have been in the other scenario. And for that, I don't mean to oversimplify it, but transparency with donors and honest conversations with them is really as simple as it needs to be. Hey, Jill and James, the reality is we need to accomplish this and we have an ambitious goal in front of us, but I need you to please understand we are also ongoing normal operations. So what I'm asking you for in this campaign is over and above the wonderful support that you already give us. We need that to do what we're already doing. So please understand that what we're talking about today is beyond the scope of your annual support.
Mhm.
You know, the honesty and genuine approach on that. That the theme with me is gift requests are a conversation, not a Q&A. So leading with honesty and making sure they're clear on what is annual fundraising and what is this campaign is a must.
That's wonderful. Good advice. So, after working on multiple campaigns, I'd love to know what you feel is the single most important lesson you want all fundraisers to understand about them.
Ooh, um, wow. I think understanding that campaigns are in true, they define extraordinary. They are extraordinary efforts. And
Great.
when we're asking ourselves to consider the extraordinary, remember you're asking your donor to consider the extraordinary, and therefore it's out of the comfort zone. And the moment that we're asking people to be out of their comfort zone, we cannot be robots. We have to be people. We have to be conversational. We have to approach this with humanity first and foremost. Um, and we can't make it about us. The dreaded, hey man, here's our case statement. Here's the menu of opportunities. Here's the amount we want you to consider. Here's the box. Pick what you want. Nothing is inspirational about that. But I would say most campaign asks still go that way. So I would encourage people to kind of pivot that mentality and put your donor first. Do the homework, and it doesn't need to be pages and pages and pages of research and all kinds of role playing and all that. Those things are important, but approach it with humanity. Don't go to them and have a real big gift conversation without having a good relationship building exercise first. Um, that way, when this all comes down to it, I always say, a good ask should be a foregone conclusion. By the time you're making the ask, you and the donor know what's coming, and it doesn't surprise anyone.
Yeah, it's great. Well, what are the biggest mistakes you see organizations make when they rush into a campaign without adequate preparation?
Yeah, I think it's the ones that are either trying to replicate what everybody else is doing, of like, oh, this worked for such and such shop across town. Surely we can replicate that. We've got, just as much talent as they do, or our mission is just as important, or that it's too tactic focused. If it's, and that was what I was alluding to with, the ask in the box of like, this is the thing, and this is all we want you to consider. Don't think beyond this. We don't want your input. Um, Please don't put a box around it. So it's that mentality of here's why we are doing the campaign. Don't start with the what the campaign is and what the goal is and all that, but like here is why we're doing it. And we're doing it because it perfectly aligns with our mission, our vision, our 5-year strategy, all those things. So that this isn't just a thing that popped out of nowhere and we decided, oh God, we've got to do this campaign now. It's a natural progression of it's bringing us from where we are today to where we say we want to be.
Right.
So I think
Right.
the organizations that are too focused on the tactics and those misunderstood what things fall within the C word, just please focus on your why and your mission, and then that'll be a much better North Star than some of these buzzwords.
Yeah, and you said it, it's extraordinary and it should be something that's exciting and spectacular for the organization and
Yeah.
has this energy that is just undeniable, and excitement that's undeniable.
Yeah.
And I often say the worst campaigns are the ones where you're dragging people into them.
Yeah.
I much prefer campaigns where I'm almost harnessing people's energy and trying to keep them somewhat contained,
Yeah.
uh, because
I
they're so
mean,
excited.
Jerry Panas left us a while ago, right? But his words still ring true of listen the gift. It's the best way to do it. And all that relies heavily on what is the core of our business, people supporting people, and therefore humanity has to be first. Strategy is necessary. Do your homework, be a great, structured and disciplined nonprofit. But at the end of the day, treasure your relationships with your donors and your staff.
Yeah, I love that. Well, two final questions. The first one is, where do you see campaign strategy evolving over the next decade, let's say, especially in healthcare and within complex institutions and organizations? What will campaigns look like in the future?
Yeah. Um, we spent a lot of time on this last year in 2024 in Denver, a group that got together to talk specifically about healthcare campaigns because we all recognize that the flood of need is coming. Um, negative negative margins during COVID, and now single digit profit margins are the norm for healthcare systems. And it's a system that doesn't work. So it's going to take a tremendous amount of money to pivot and reinvent healthcare.
Mm.
And no organization is going to be able to do that with an average margin of 3 to 5%. A lot of healthcare organizations that have a good size donor base and philanthropy shop are raising maybe $100 to $200 million a year across their enterprise. You know, our individual shop here in Charlotte is not raising that much, but across our enterprise we are. It would take $4 to $5 billion in net revenue to replace what philanthropy is doing. So neither of these things are achievable. There's not another $4 to $5 billion in net revenue, nor are we going to be able to have every healthcare system in the country doing multi-billion-dollar campaigns.
Right.
So I believe we'll rise to the occasion. But again, to reemphasize, the way the campaigns will change is, and this is the way I feel, and I think the way our organization is going, we have our highest level philanthropy leaders sitting on the CEO cabinet and hearing about strategies and problems early on and being part of the solution, bringing what we can do to the table rather than waiting for it to flow downhill to us and be a dire need by that point. So flipping the mentality of things fall to the foundation as a last resort. The organizations in healthcare that are going to do this best are the ones that put philanthropy at the strategy table.
Good. Perfect. Thank you for that. And last question. If you could offer one piece of advice to a fundraiser preparing for their first campaign,
Yeah.
what would it be?
One piece is almost impossible, but for the sake of time, adaptation is a must. A lot of work goes into getting ready for a campaign, and therefore we fall in love with them and we think that we have the biggest and best and smartest campaign that's ever been built, and we just get so darn proud of them. It's only going to be smart for so much time, and things change so rapidly now. You have to build a campaign and a campaign plan that is adaptable and evergreen for as long as possible. So our campaign is a 7-year campaign. We're in year 5.5. If we were still citing the same old stuff that was being said 5 years ago, we'd be dead in the water.
Mhm.
So our campaign has lived with the times. It will continue to do so. There's going to be something that we're raising money for at the end of this campaign that we did not see ourselves raising money for 7 years ago. So, but that won't be a problem because we didn't build the campaign to be for specific things. We built guardrails and we built, kind of vertical focus areas, but we did not do a menu of like, here's the naming, we'll build those along the way. So be adaptable. We got smart people in fundraising, have the resiliency and the adaptability to carry your campaign forward, even if you hit some roadblocks.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, Ryan, thank you for being such a force for good. Thank you for sharing a peek into the campaign landscape. I feel like maybe the only way that we could adequately address campaigns through a podcast is to have a podcast specifically on campaigns.
Probably.
And dissect every little element, each of which, those 25 things, is so darn important. So maybe we'll look into doing that in the future.
We'll look into that, and certainly because I've spent so much time in it, I've just become a natural content expert in it. But like, there are people who know amazing things about campaigns that I've never even heard of or tried. So
yeah, well, you and I can host a show. We'll bring on other content experts, and maybe then we can start to scratch the surface on all that is out there to know about campaigns. But thank you again for being our guest today. And if you like out there what we're putting out, would encourage you to like and subscribe to Mastering Fundraising. We also have 2 other podcasts, Lead for Good and The Nonprofit Edge. All of our podcasts interview extraordinary individuals with content expertise so that we can all be lifelong learners. Check it out. Enjoy the shows. And until next time, take care. And thanks again for being with us.
Thank you for joining this episode of Mastering Fundraising. We hope the conversation was helpful and invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast for more conversations with extraordinary nonprofit and fundraising leaders. To learn more about Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership, please visit us on the web at fulcrumleader.com. To learn more about the 5-Tool Fundraiser, please visit us at 5toolfundraiser.com. We want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Thank you for the important work you do to make our world stronger. We look forward to welcoming you back during a future podcast. In the meantime, take care and be well.